Let's get back to the breaking news. Hamit Koskan, who was found guilty of a religiously aggravated public order offence after burning a Koran outside the Turkish consulate in London, has won an appeal at Southwark Crown Court against the conviction.
Well, joining us now is a man who was at that appeal at Southwark Crown Court, the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick. Robert, it's quite unusual for a Shadow Justice Secretary to turn up at a trial, at an appeal. Why did you decide to go?
Well, I thought this was a very important and potentially landmark case. It's a victory for freedom of speech that Hamit Koskan has been cleared today. Look, you might find it unpleasant, you might even find it downright nasty to burn a religious text in a public place, and it's not something that I would condone. But in most instances, it is not a criminal offence. Parliament voted almost 20 years ago now to abolish our blasphemy laws. And the authorities, by pursuing this case in the way that they did, were trying to recreate a blasphemy law by the back door. So it was very important to fight this every step of the way. And the fact that the court today has cleared Mr. Koskan, I think, is a very significant signal. This country does not have a blasphemy law, and it never should do.
Now, is there a problem? So, for example, there was sort of talk of a definition of Islamophobia, which would then make what he did potentially Islamophobic. Would that be, are they kind of trying to sneak in a way of making Islam kind of something that if you do something against, which ultimately would be a blasphemy law, is that kind of like a backdoor way of doing that?
Well, that's the worry that many of us have, that creating this government-approved definition of Islamophobia, certainly if it were ever to be placed into law, would create a blasphemy law by the back door. In fact, not even by the back door at all. It would be a blasphemy law, and it'd be a blasphemy law that was primarily about one religion. And we mustn't have that situation. But there would be instances where I think all of us in society would agree that you shouldn't be burning a religious text if it was being done, for example, outside a mosque or a synagogue or a church or a religious school, specifically, clearly, to intimidate or to incite hatred of those people who are inside or passing around. But that wasn't what was happening in this instance. This was a man on a street burning it as part of a personal, political protest. He wasn't expecting to offend anybody who was walking past. In fact, there was a Deliveroo driver who passed him, and then somebody came rushing out of the building, slashing him with a knife, saying that they were offended by it. The bar has to be set very, very high.
You wouldn't know what was in his mind if you were just seeing him do that. Do you know what I mean? He had to explain why he was doing it.
Exactly.
There's some passerby who thought they'd attack him with a knife.
And I think the other thing about this incident that became so egregious was the very real sense of two-tier justice, where here was a man who was making a protest and yet was dragged before the courts and found guilty. And then you had a man who literally ran out of a building with a knife, an Islamist, trying to attack him, potentially even trying to kill him. And yet that man, although he was found guilty, was given a suspended sentence, never went to prison.
Unbelievable.
I thought that was an appalling miscarriage of justice.
Have you had a random call lately from a strange number, maybe trying to sell you something or even scam you? If so, your info could be out there. That's because of data brokers, shady companies that scrape the internet for your personal details and sell them to marketers or even scammers. These days, scammers can even use AI to mimic your friends' voices and trick you into sending money. It's not just annoying. Data brokers often target vulnerable people with high-interest loans or sketchy offers. But there is a solution. Incogni, the sponsor of this video. Incogni contacts data brokers on your behalf and requests your info be deleted from their databases. And because your data can keep popping up, Incogni keeps sending removal requests to make sure it stays gone. They've just launched a new unlimited plan with custom removals. If you find your info on a weird website, just send them the link and their privacy team will work to get it taken down. Getting started is easy. Hit the link in the description, create your account and let Incogni handle the rest. It's risk-free for 30 days and you'll get 60% off an annual plan with the code GBNews. Take back control of your data with Incogni.
This is such a confusing case in so many ways that perhaps, yes, this judgment is good for the protester at the end of the day, but the number of different twists and turns that this case has taken. You initially pointed out one of the grounds on which this trial was being brought in the first place. Not a sort of incitement, not a public order offence as such, but instead offending the institution of Islam. Those are the words to the effect of the initial prosecution.
That's right. Look, I'm going to be writing to the Attorney General later today, demanding a full inquiry from the Crown Prosecution Service as to the way in which they have handled this case. Because initially, they created this imaginary charge of incitement against the religious institution of Islam. No such offence exists. We saw that. We took action against them and shamed them, frankly, into dropping that charge. They then brought forward another lesser charge under the Public Order Act. He was found guilty of that in the first instance, and then today a High Court judge sitting at Southwark Crown Court has cleared him of that offence as well. So there are very serious questions now to answer by the CPS as to how they've conducted this case. They've dragged a man, ultimately found innocent, through the courts for months, wasted presumably hundreds of thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money, and created these trumped-up charges which have been found to be bogus.
Now, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, the initial prosecution of this guy said that he knew well what would happen if he burned a Koran outside the Turkish consulate, that he had already posted a video on social media of him burning a Koran on his own property and received death threats, that he was trying to provoke people coming at him, perhaps even coming at him with weapons, that's what he wanted to incite. That's what the first judge found. And wouldn't that be, under the terms of the Public Order Act, not legal? I mean, that was the argument that the first judge made.
Well, look, I don't condone the burning of a religious text. It's not something I would ever do. It's offensive to many people, probably most people in our society. But it's not criminal to do that. Or at least the bar for criminality should be set extremely high. And I don't think that was the case.
Why wasn't
here.
it inciting?
Because he didn't intend, as far as I'm aware, to incite people. He was doing it on a street. Yes, he might record it might be seen by people, but he didn't expect passers-by to take offence. How could he have predicted that a man on a delivery bike who was passing by would be so offended that he would stop and kick and spit on him? And why should that be a criminal offence in any event?
Well,
in fact, it was disgraceful that that individual behaved in that way and seems to have got away with it because he cycled off down a street in London.
But to be fair, you would know that if you do something like that, you will spark some level of outrage, despite what's in your mind as to your reasoning. The people on the outside don't know that, so they'll just do whatever it is that they do.
But I don't think you can argue that he brought it on himself, that someone
100%.
charges out of a building with a knife and slashes him.
But a knife,
I mean, that was on the bloke who did that.
It's not acceptable. So what is the outcome then after all this? Because if they're able to kind of interpret the law like that, and it's just lucky that the Free Speech Union, people like you, were able to speak up, but there'll be other incidences that might end up going under the radar. So how do we make sure that the government stick with what is actually law rather than this sort of overreach?
Well, that's why cases like this are so important and why it matters that those of us who are in Parliament and organisations like the Free Speech Union stand up and fight to ensure that the law as set by Parliament is properly applied by the Crown Prosecution Service and ultimately by the courts. And it may sometimes be uncomfortable because it may mean taking the side of someone who's done something that you find eccentric or even downright unpleasant. But if it isn't criminal, then it has to be defended. And here we felt it was very clear that Parliament had said no more blasphemy laws 20 years ago. We shouldn't allow the courts, the authorities, to bring one back by the back door.
All right. Well, listen, I just want to sneak one in on the ID cards. What are your thoughts, ID cards?
I'm very strongly against ID cards, always have been. I don't want to live in that kind of country. And I think it's a totally fake argument. If anyone believes this is going to stop illegal migration, they're in cloud cuckoo land. If you go to your local, Albanian car wash, the bloke who's running it knows full well that the people there are illegal workers. He's already under a legal obligation to check whether they've got the right to work in the UK. The fact that on your smartphone you might have a digital version of the documents you should already be showing won't make a blind bit of difference.
OK, and I suppose there's going to be a lot of people looking at the Conservative Party at this period in time. The Conservative Party, of course, had its conference conclude on Wednesday. Some big announcements, some sort of putting the party, putting a new line in the sand, perhaps. I wanted to ask you whether you think that the Conservative Party is going to do well in May. What would be your benchmark for a successful set of elections in Scotland, in Wales, in many local authorities? Is it second place, third place, fourth place?
Well, look, we're only just over a year after suffering our worst ever election defeat. So I've always been clear that we have a mountain to climb to regain the public's trust and confidence. But I want the Conservative Party to be back in business, to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves down. And so, of course, we've got to use May to be winning seats, to be getting into a much stronger position. We can't keep
gaining ground in May is your benchmark.
Well, we've got to be gaining ground on where we were last year. Otherwise we're not making any progress at all.
OK, Robert Jenrick, thanks indeed for being with us here on Good Afternoon Britain.